Hey guys, Steinixos here. So today we'll be talking about Magellan, the warden of the hellish prison impelled down from One Piece, versus Mayuri Kurotsuchi, the 12th Division captain of the Gote 13, and the second president of the Shinigami Research Institute from Bleach. Now for this battle we won't be focusing on things like speed, or quantifying attack potency in terms of levels, or other such fine considerations, but rather we'll just be focusing on the interaction of their main abilities, because I thought that would be an interesting discussion to have. So with that understood, let's get into it. Now, whenever Bleach characters are brought up, there are usually some preliminary concerns that are typically raised, such as some people claiming that characters outside of Bleach can't touch Soul Reapers. But as I already said, we won't be focusing on things like that, as I really just wanted to contrast abilities here. However, let me quickly clear up two things. So firstly, in chapter 9 of Bleach, it was stated that normal humans can't touch Soul Reapers. However, this was a mistranslation by Viz. The actual Japanese says that humans can touch Soul Reapers due to their high spirit particle density. Then secondly, we know that Soul Reapers are made of spirit particles or reishi, which is obviously different than what makes up a regular human body. However, souls in Bleach are not exactly the normal fictional souls that you are used to, but rather they are pretty similar to regular humans. They have all the normal organs that us humans do, and they have blood running throughout their body. They have nerves, and as it relates specifically to this battle, Mayuri's drugs work based on affecting normal human anatomical structures like the hippocampus of the brain, and their bodies even share the same or similar lethal doses as normal humans to certain substances. So at a macro level, there is no discrepancy from an anatomical perspective about whether either combatant substances will work. Also, Magellan ate the Doku Doku no Mi, a paramecia type devil fruit that grants the user the ability to produce and control different types of poisons, as well as it grants the user immunity to all forms of poison. So Magellan is a poison man. Now, this power seems simple, but it's actually pretty tricky, because for those of you who know a bit about toxicology, you'll know that any substance can actually be considered a poison. What determines if a substance is a poison or not is simply the dose that it is given in. This fact is even so intimately known by the author of Bleach that he built a whole character, the Quincy Askin Nak Levar, around this principle of lethal doses. So technically, Magellan being immune to all poisons could mean that he's immune to all substances once they've passed the toxic dose. However, that would make this battle very boring. So for the sake of this fight, I'll only be granting Magellan immunity to the same or similar effects demonstrated by his poisons, or any effect that can be reasonably extrapolated or inferred. Now, one of Mayuri's drugs is an anesthetic, and this anesthetic can be sprinkled throughout the battlefield, and it has the specific function of at least numbing the opponent's nerves. And then a step above this anesthetic is his nerve freezing agent. Now, in contrast to the anesthetic, the nerve freezing agent needs to be directly injected into the body. However, once this is done, it completely freezes all nervous transmission of the entire body, and thus all the organs of the body, now without nervous transmission to keep them going, basically just shut down. Thus an opponent is deprived of even the circulation of blood necessary to keep them alive. So of course, those two agents, especially the latter, are very formidable against any normal opponent. However, as you should know, paralysis is the hallmark of many poisons, and thus Magellan's own basic poisons has demonstrated the ability to rob an opponent of their movement. So it's pretty safe to say that Magellan is immune to paralysis from Mayuri's anesthetic and nerve freezing agent. Then, another drug which Mayuri keeps in his arsenal is his superhuman drug. Now, this is a drug which enhances the body's sensory perception over 1 trillion times, making the opponent perceive a single second as taking over a century to occur because their perception is so heightened. However, their body's reaction is stuck in normal time. Thus, in Mayuri's fight against Espada Granz, Granz could only wait for his death for over a century. However, again, in the fight against Luffy, Magellan's poisons have been demonstrated to not only rob a person of movement, but they have also been systematically shown to be able to alter the senses, gradually robbing Luffy of things like his sense of sight and his sense of hearing. So again, again, through inference, it is probably fair to say that Magellan's poison immunity grants him immunity to the effect of drugs which alter his senses, like Mayuri's superhuman drug. Then, Mayuri also has his post-cognition drug. Now, in terms of effect, it is basically a variant combination of the superhuman drug and the paralysis agents, in that it alters the opponent's perception to trap them in a time loop, and then after 10 loops, it temporarily paralyzes them by affecting the balance center in the brain. Now, many real-world poisons work by directly affecting the brain, and as we already discussed, Magellan has immunity to drug-induced paralysis and sensory changes, so this drug is also useless under this paradigm. But outside of those drugs, we know that Mayuri also has his sword, Ashisoji Jizo. Now in its Shikai state, we know that Ashisoji Jizo is able to cause paralysis of anywhere it stabs or cut by injecting a highly complex drug that selectively blocks only the neural impulses involved in movement, and thus the person can't move, but they can still feel pain. But again, we already went over the fact that Magellan is immune to paralysis drug agents. And just as an interesting point, remember, Magellan was able to take away Luffy's senses and movement while leaving him with his sense of pain to suffer excruciating pain for over 24 hours before he was supposed to die. But then, we also know that in Ashisoji Jizo's Bankai state, it is able to exhale a lethal poison made from Mayuri's blood, which causes anyone inflicted to spew blood and presumably bleed to death. And Mayuri prevents anyone from developing immunity by altering its composition after each use. However, again, this is only useful against someone who wasn't immune in the first place. Magellan, who is immune to all poisons, would remain unaffected. So Mayuri is pretty low on options here. However, he isn't completely out of options. So for one, in his Shikai state, Mayuri's sword can emit a scream that paralyzes anyone within earshot who listens to it for 4 seconds or more, entirely immobilizing all their voluntary movement. Now, because this is not a poison, Magellan could definitely be paralyzed through this method, and this could possibly be paired with his Bankai, which has an assortment of blades that could potentially slice up Magellan, as well as Ashisoji Jizo eating Magellan whole. However, this is unlikely to work because even if Magellan wasn't using poison earplugs and thus his body was paralyzed by the scream, he does not himself need to be actively moving to produce or use his poison. Like, Magellan just naturally breathing releases poisonous gas, which could prevent Mayuri from getting close. Furthermore, the poison is able to naturally flow from his body with just his thoughts, encasing himself in it and forming attacks like his three-headed Hydra, which again is able to move around freely and attack or defend simply by him just thinking. And remember, Magellan's regular poison has the ability to dissolve anything that it comes in contact with, and his strongest poison, which is in the form of his Venom Demon, that is basically a poison Susanoo, this is able to dissolve even Mr. 3's wax. Like, we saw no proper counter for this. All Luffy and his crew could really do was just run. So Ashisoji Jizo getting close to Magellan can only be done at its own detriment. So Mayuri is pretty much out of options. But how about Magellan? Well, we know that Mayuri is immune to all of his own poisons that he makes. However, he isn't immune to all poisons. And just like Mayuri, who alters his poisons after each use so as to prevent anyone from getting immunity, Magellan, the Poison Man, is able to create an innumerable number of combinations of different poison types. Thus, Mayuri definitely would not have immunity to this. And yes, Mayuri is pretty smart. This is exemplified in him being able to quickly figure out the Quincy zombification requirements and applying his blood alteration serum countermeasure. However, he didn't create this blood alteration serum on the spot. He needed time to do this before the battle. And more importantly, this was only against one specific type of pathogen. Remember, Magellan, in contrast, mixes his poisons in different combinations, and thus it is nearly impossible to create an antidote. So despite Mayuri's intellect and resourcefulness, it is very unlikely that he could come up with a countermeasure to this in the midst of battle. However, let us assume that Mayuri had some planning time and samples, so he did some stuff like switching out his organs and coming with some antidotes and stocking up on any necessary drugs, so he could at least keep the poison at bay for a little while. But even with this, remember, Magellan's poison is also able to dissolve things. So even a Mayuri who is stocked up on things like his Limerick Mayuri in medicine, could only hold off his demise for so long, and one slip up will have him completely dissolved, especially if Magellan is using his Venom Demon. So even though there's a potential world in which with enough prep time Mayuri could possibly win, Magellan's immunity to most of Mayuri's normal methods, as well as having a plethora of ways to put down Mayuri, leads Magellan to be the victor of this match. Now, it's also important to note that Mayuri could potentially stalemate this match by going into his liquid form, where he says he takes no damage. However, I'm not sure how effective this would be against an opponent with Magellan's skill set. And yes, as a captain, Mayuri should be skilled in various hados. However, this skill set was not emphasized in the manga, and it isn't his main fighting style anyway, so that is why it didn't play a major role in this battle. But anyway, those are my thoughts on that interaction. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video. And shout out to Shadow, who is in one of my highest membership tiers of this channel. But anyway, see you guys next time.